Here in the bay, right? An obelisk. You guys know who invented or built obelisks first?
Egyptians.
Anybody know the history on that? It was Egyptian.
Yay, ding ding, you get it right.
The Egyptians built them to reach towards the heavens to get closer to gods. Is what one of the beliefs is in an obelisk. So it's ironic that there's an obelisk here. All right, we also have one in Washington, D.C. Huge. One in Washington, D.C. was built because the founding fathers of our nation happened to belong to a little certain group, kind of, well, known as the Freemasons. Guess what Captain Cook was? A Freemason. So these are the guys that took all of the secret knowledge from Europe and spread it around the world, all right, or developed the societies around the world. But yeah, Cook was a Freemason. He was on his third attempt at navigating the globe when he came across these islands. He was on what were known as voyages of discovery. They were scientific expeditions. He wasn't out there trying to conquer any nations in any way whatsoever. He was trying to gain knowledge, and most importantly, he was trying to find a shorter route to the Orient. The European markets were flooded with goods, textiles, supplies, silks, and spices from the East Indies and Southeast Asia. And it was a huge endeavor to be able to take caravans across to Southeast Asia, Middle East, Eastern Europe to get them into the bazaars and the markets of Western Europe. So it was all about money, all about global trade on the rise. So ironically, the first boat he sailed around the world with was called the Endeavour. And that's when he came across Australia, New Zealand, South Pacific. He was tasked with following the transit of Venus across the southern hemisphere. That was his job. Make a navigable route all the way to the Orient. All right. So on his second attempt of going around the world, it was interesting. He went from, instead of from east to west, he went from west to east. And this time he did that route in reverse, but he sailed with a chronometer. Do you guys know what a chronometer is? Watch.
Oh.
Which was a scientific instrument to break down our day into hours, minutes, and seconds. Precise clock gave you the ability to judge time. They knew their speed that they were doing by a little bucket of line that they had at the bow of the boat, and at certain increments they had knots tied on the line. They would throw it, and they would walk to the back of the boat and count how many knots paid out, and that was their speed. So if you knew your speed, the length of the vessel, those knots going, and you knew time, you know what that formula gives you? Distance. He was judging his distance about going around the world with a watch. So he was like the godfather of longitude. So he came across these islands on his third attempt at navigating the globe when he was tasked by the Admiralty to search for a shortcut between the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. He was looking for a navigable waterway around North America, called the Northwest Passage. They thought during the summer months that the ice shelf would melt enough to be able to sail the boat that way, instead of having to go around the Horn of South America or Cape Good Hope off of Africa. So he's down in Tahiti. It just provisioned his ship to head up towards Alaska, where they were planning on spending the summer months, navigating around up to the Bering Sea. So 6 weeks after leaving Tahiti, he runs into these islands, the southern shore of Hawaii. He hung out there for a few days, took some calculations and measurements of what their latitude and longitude was, and he named the Hawaiian island chain. You guys know what Cook called these islands?
Sandwich Islands.
They were named the Sandwich Islands. They were named after his benefactor, who was the gentleman that owned the boats that he sailed for, who was the first Lord of the Admiralty and the fourth Earl of Sandwich. So he named him in his honor, which is interesting. So Cook leaves Hawaii and heads up to Alaska. And over the summer of 1778, some things started to happen. First of all, they ran out of food. They were surviving off of two different resources. One was walrus meat. I heard it's pretty gristly.
I know.
Not too good. The second one was sauerkraut. Pickling was a way of preserving food. Cabbage was ungodly cheap for the Admiralty. And the irony of this was, Cook was the first European to sail around the world without the loss of life to scurvy, which he attributed to a probiotic that was in sauerkraut. So that was what you got, a square meal a day on an English ship. And everybody got the same portion or the same ration. So the food was bad. The weather was rough. And then worst of all, they ran out of alcohol. Once the booze was gone, morale quickly went south. And nonetheless, alcohol was very important. It was the only medication they had. We have tons of medicines we can use nowadays. But back then, sailing around the world, alcohol was mixed with your water, a concoction known as grog. That way you could not get sick or dysentery from the bacteria. So all these factors came into Cook returning to the Sandwich Isles in late November of 1778. He spent the better part of 10 weeks mapping the coastlines of Oahu, Molokai, Maui, and the Big Island. Cook was a famed cartographer due to the fact that he had that watch. He was making maps. So he finally and eventually first made landfall here in the middle of Kealakekua Bay. He found that the leeward waters here on this side of the island were excellent, so they needed to find a harbor to winter in. The backdrop of these cliffs right here provided a perfect harbor. Kealakekua Bay is the second most naturally protected harbor in all of Hawaii, behind Pearl Harbor. So as Cook comes into this bay, it was known that there was a very large settlement here. They didn't know how big, but his greeting in the middle of January 1779 was reported to be 5,000 Hawaiians. They thought Cook was the return of Lono. They thought he was a god. They did.
Wow.
Honestly. They believed that, Cook was landing at a specific season over the winter solstice called Makahiki. This was a brief period during the winter solstice where the Hawaiians relaxed their laws, their kapus, which were punishable by death, couldn't kill each other. What's the opposite of death? Out of the Hiki season became a festival of celebrating everything good. They had a little Olympiad that they did, the Makahiki Games, but it was, but nonetheless, it was a celebration of life and fertility. Cook, unbeknownst to him, was believed to be Lono by the Hawaiians. So the reception for him was in a huge honor, all right? Cook took one look around the sailors' expressions as they saw these 5,000 natives here. That was half the population. He believed the bay was inhabited by 10,000 people. You guys know, implemented rules of engagement. Due to these scientific expeditions, he did not want to spread disease to this population because of the isolation of these islands. It's unbelievably conscious of him in the year 1779 to think so, but the previous voyage through Tahiti, 400 Tahitians, or around that numbers, died of smallpox, which Cook attributed to his men. So in order to get off the boats and go on shore and mingle with natives here, every sailor needed to be looked over from head to toe. They had to have a physical. They were physically looking for measles, smallpox, and other diseases of the flesh. If you had a clean bill of health, you could leave the boat, go on shore, mingle with natives, get supplies, and be happy. If you were sick, you were reprimanded to the ship. You had to do the ship work, which left a lot of sailors quite disgruntled that they couldn't disembark the boat. All is good for about 2 weeks in the relationship between the Hawaiians and the English. They thought they were gods. They wanted to procreate with gods to have a half immortal child. 2 weeks go by, Cook has a crew member die. His name's William Walton. The first Christian services held in these islands was a funeral that was presided over by Captain Cook at the south end of the bay. Native Hawaiians gathered around and watched him perform the sacred ceremony and quickly realized as they were covering William Walton's body up with earth and burying him, he was dead. That was a sign of mortality, the first sign of mortality for the English. And the Hawaiians grew quite suspicious. They were really no longer willing to want to just give them the food and supplies that they had requested. They wanted to barter. They wanted something in return. Currency used by Captain Cook, which became highly sought after out here, was iron, metal. These islands are very young geologically. All that lava flowing over there, no metal. This was a Stone Age culture nonetheless. Cook and the Hawaiians saw the properties of metal to be unbelievably strong, stronger than koa. Koa is teak, and koa means strength. So iron became sought after. The simplest form of iron that the Hawaiians wanted to get their hands on the most were nails. Cook had showed the natives how to forge nails to fishing hooks, spear tips. The light bulb goes off. Man, we need to get our hands on as many strong fishing hooks as possible. It was a big status symbol for them. Cook went up above these cliffs every evening with a handful of his officers. They were making astronomical observations of their location. And every evening he went up there after William Waltman died. Villagers from all around the bay came out to the ship in the middle of the night and started trading with the sailors on the boat for the nails that were holding their boat together. Disease shows up. Cook's very distraught with that, tricks his men to leave in the bay, said, we need to get out of here before we provoke the natives anymore. Make it 3 days out of here, encountered a storm between here and Maui, and the foremast of his ship collapsed. You know why? Yeah, because they pulled the nails out of the rigging of the boat. So through feats of great seamanship, Cook sailed the broken boat back to the bay. The Hawaiians saw that this ship or this temple was broken, and they started to see through the deceit of him potentially being a deity or a god. Well, they let him land, they let him get supplies, and the entire time wanted to barter for more metal, which Cook could not sacrifice. So it was said in the late hours of February 13th, 1779, that a handful of natives potentially stole one of Cook's rowboats. Cook woke up the next morning, which was Valentine's Day. Couldn't find their rowboat, so he took 10 Marines into the village behind us called Ka'avaloa. They walked the grounds looking for that rowboat. Couldn't find it, met at the chief's residence, and they invited the chief out to the ship. Their intentions were to hold the chief hostage till their demands were met. We'll give you your chief back once you give us our boat back. The chief here, rightfully so, resisted the invitation, and 2 of Cook's Marines broke a sacred kapu. They touched him. They botched the kidnapping. The old Hawaiian culture, you were never allowed to look royalty in their eyes, walk in their shadow, or touch them. Punishment like death on the spot. So Cook and his Marines realized they made a grave mistake. Came back to the water's edge, signaled another rowboat to come pick them up and turn around, and about 500 villagers were running at him, calling for his head. His Marines shot their musket fire into the advancing crowd, thinking it would ward off an attack. It was an act of war. The Hawaiians saw fit to do battle with a god. It's a huge honor to die in a battle, especially against a god. So Cook and 7 of those 10 Marines lost their lives here in the bay due to blunt force trauma. Pretty plain and simple. And he could have averted his fate that day if he would have just dove in the water and swam for it. The irony was that officers and captains in the Royal Navy did not know how to swim until the mid-1960s. That's where the saying, the captain goes down with the ship, comes from. It was a huge disgrace to lose a vessel. So it would be a much more honorable death if he would have died at sea. Yeah. Cook went around the world 2.5 times, charted 80% of the Pacific Ocean, revolutionized latitude and longitude. He was a pretty monumental character. I hate to make short of what the Hawaiian perspective was here too. It was a pretty eye-opening experience for the native Hawaiians too. It would be comparable to aliens landed on the planet and basically presenting themselves to us. It was a huge, huge change for them, and it came quickly.